natural emotion. You make me feel I'm good and I'm hurt.
Howard and his friend Peter and I had this famous lost weekend when, after reading Neil Spencer's review of in The Enemy of the Sex Pistols, don't look over your shoulder, but the Sex Pistols are coming. We spent this lost weekend. Peter, who I'd met through Howard before, had a car for the weekend to attend a Students' Union conference in London. So he and Howard came down. Howard had rung The Enemy and found out about the sex shop. We pitched up there, met Malcolm McLaren, who said, obviously tickled that people had travelled to find out more, said, well, I've got 2 gigs this weekend. We'll put you on the guest list. First time I'd heard of guest list. And they were just great. And Howard and Peter hurried back to Manchester, determined to get a group they'd been toying with up and running, and to bring the Pistols to Manchester. And I brought the Pistols to my art studio at the University of Reading with, equally famous 20 or so people, but a lot more would say that they were there.
I was at home. I'd written this song, Fast Cars, and some other songs, which I kind of played to these guys round the corner. I was trying to get a band, but it wasn't really happening with him. So I phoned a guy at the newspaper. I said, I'll meet you outside the Free Trade Hall and we'll talk about forming a band, writing our own songs and all this. So I went down to the Free Trade Hall, waiting to meet this guy, and we was going to go to a bar around the corner and talk about getting this band together. As it turned out, I was stood outside the Free Trade Hall, and a guy in an all-leather suit, like the Elvis comeback tour, it was Malcolm McLaren. He said, they're inside here. And I thought, I don't know anything about this. He said, the Sex Pistols are inside. And I said, no, I'm waiting to meet someone, I'm forming a group, He said, no, they're inside here. So I went in with him. Because Malcolm also liked that situationist thing, it just creates situations. And he introduced me to Pete Shelley, who was collecting tickets on the door in this kiosk. So I said to Pete, look, I'll meet you in the bar and we'll talk about this group thing. But I thought, they was expecting to meet somebody else, and I was expecting to meet somebody else, but we met each other, and we was talking in the bar. I thought some of it made sense, but other things I didn't see on the phone. And he thought the same with me, it was like, but we got on really well. There was some communication. So, and Howard was there. Howard Devoto, he was working the lights, I think, or something. So I said hello to him briefly. So the people we were supposed to meet, they're probably still standing outside the Free Trade Hall now. Somebody needs to tell them it's not going to happen.
I was there for the simple reason that I was so bored at work that I used to devour the music papers. I had that release. I was interested in heavy metal music, Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, through school. And I used to read the music press because it was the most interesting thing to read. So every morning when I was at work in Manchester, I would wait for the papers to be delivered and I would run in and get Sounds, New Musical Express and Melody Maker, and I would literally devour it. So I had been reading in the paper about this new band called the Sex Pistols, and the thing that interested me was that every gig seemed to end in a riot, and it ended up in them fighting with the audience, which obviously was something that Led Zeppelin didn't do. So it made it more real in a way, because Manchester at that time was very violent. Going out in Manchester, you were taking your life in your hands, and it's never been any different. I didn't know any different, so it was just the way it was. So I was maybe subconsciously looking for an escape, but I hadn't found one. So when I went on holiday for 2 weeks in England, and when I came back, I read the Manchester Evening News, and there was an advert for the Sex Pistols at the Leicester Free Trade Hall, which I'd been to, and I knew where it was. Very few people did. And it was 50p. So I phoned up Barney and said, oh, that group I've been telling you about, the Sex Pistols, are on tonight. I said, we should go. So we went, and it was me, him, his wife, Sue at the time, and my best mate, Terry Mason from school. We went to see the Sex Pistols.
Immediately the title drew us of the band, because in 1976, to call yourself the Sex Pistols was a bit outre. And so we were drawn to that like moths to a flame, as 15-year-old boys would be. And then we read these reviews, which were basically photocopies from the NME. I remember one press cutting describing Johnny Rotten as a dementoid, and that he attacked the crowd. So this really, we were like, this looks really interesting. And we saw that it was 50 pence. So we thought, we'll go. My friend immediately shouts out, you're not very sexy, are you? Johnny Rotten turns round and replies, why, do you want some sex? And my friend, in a heartbeat, turned back and replied, oh, I didn't expect that for 50 pence. And it kind of shut him up straight away. It kind of bucked the trend, because he was very confrontational. And from there, they just launched into this set, which we thoroughly enjoyed, but it was rock and roll. We weren't told at that point that it was punk, but it was certainly an energising night.
So we all met at that first Sex Pistols show. Me and Pete sat at the back. There was rows and rows of empty seats, and probably about 20 people there. And we watched the Sex Pistols, but also as we were watching, we discussed how we were going to make this band the Buzzcocks. So it was inspirational watching the Sex Pistols. It was, well, they just sounded so amazing at that point in time. You hadn't seen anything like that, you know.
Oh, I thought it was all over for bands like us and Genesis and Roxy Music. It was like a massive change. Yeah, you know, I mean, change is good, but I understood the spirit of it, but I couldn't get into the actual playing of it or the writing of it. It was a wholly different sort of, way of doing things.
I became obsessed with the Sex Pistols gig because I met a guy at work who claimed that he'd been to the gig. This was when I was 16, just a couple of years after the gig. And I met this guy at work who said, oh yeah, I was there. And I said to him, I don't believe you, sir. Although I didn't actually say it in those exact words. And the next day he brought his ticket stubs in and some pictures that he'd taken from the stalls, the seats. So I said, someone should tell that story and, tell the truth of it, finally. And 20 years later, I'm working at the greatest television company the world has ever known, Granada Television, and I'm making the documentary that I promised I would make. And that turned into a book. And so if anyone can be accused of myth making in Manchester, so I'm probably at the front of the queue, to be honest. But I approach music writing journalistically, track people down, talk to people, ask them questions, and find out that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. So myths are nice, but it's nice to find out the truth and to see if it's worthy of a myth, whether it's worthy of being legendary.
I didn't attend the first one. Hundreds of thousands of people said that they attended the first one, but believe me, they didn't.
Was I at the Sex Pistols concert? Yes, I was. Yeah, I wasn't born, but I was there. I was born. I would have been 10 years old, so I had no real way of getting there, but I didn't even know about it.
No, I know what you're going to say. Before you even say it, no, I was not one of the 200,000 people that attended the Lesser Free Trade Hall gig. Absolutely, 1,000% not. But because I knew Mick Rossi and the Dogs and everything, I knew they were playing. I knew, I had the chance to go, but it just never happened. So no, I wasn't there.
Unfortunately, I was just too young. If everybody who'd been at that concert, who said they'd been at that concert, was at that concert would have been at the fucking Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. There's a lot of lying going on. But no, everyone who was there knows it was there, Morrissey and Marky Smith and the Joy Division boys and probably the ACR boys were all there. So yeah, the stuff of myth and legend, that concert, isn't it?
I was there. Were you there?
I was there, and my wife was there. My dogs were there.
I went twice. Actually.
I did, yeah. I played it.
Yeah, I played. Were you playing? I
was on stage.
We played it.
Yeah, we played it.